After hearing that, there was no indictment Wednesday. The Justice Department announced that it would open a civil rights investigation. And here to tell us more about how the federal investigation may play out is former prosecutor Peter Odom. Now, prosecutors often face difficulties in proving a criminal civil rights case against police officers.
Right.
Will the federal justice system be able to produce a different decision than the state's grand jury?
Well, can I just say at the outset, and that's an excellent question, but let me just talk about the elephant in the room for a second, all right? Eric Garner died for selling a cigarette on the street. I mean, this was a low-level misdemeanor. The police could have written him a ticket, called him to court in a couple weeks, and that would have been the end of it. Instead, Officer Pantaleo decided he was going to arrest him, something he didn't have to do, a decision that he made. He put this chokehold on Eric Garner, trying to bring him to the ground when Eric Garner was clearly doing nothing to provoke it, eventually causing his death. And were you aware that the coroner's office or the medical examiner's office ruled this a homicide?
Right.
I mean, in
Exactly.
what world is that okay? I guess in Staten Island, but in what other world is that okay for an officer to do that?
That's why people are so upset about the fact that he was not indicted.
It's crazy.
Now, it seems that Loretta Lynch has become the champion of these civil rights cases, in cases like the Bias case and others in New York. When federal prosecutors have pursued civil rights violations after local authorities have failed or declined to prosecute, there have been convictions. Do you see that as being a likely outcome in this case?
Well, I see this as a much stronger case than the Ferguson case. I mean, in the Ferguson case, there was a lot of conflicting testimony. There was a lot of testimony to support the officer. A dozen witnesses testified in support of the officer in that case, corroborating what he had to say. There was physical evidence corroborating what the officer had to say. Okay, here, on the other hand, you've got videotape, graphic evidence of a police officer engaging in excessive force. I mean, there's nothing left to the imagination. Eric Garner is shown doing nothing to provoke the force, and the officer is seen throwing his arm around that suspect and trying to pull him to the ground, eventually leading to that person's death. So this is a much more clear-cut case. I believe that the prosecutors will be inclined to bring charges.
Now, everything that you mentioned, this is one of those situations where we're fighting for things like body cameras. We had an entire video, 14-minute video of this entire situation. And still no indictment. And still no indictment. What is it about Loretta Lynch that she can possibly change the outcome of this case on the federal level?
Well, it is more difficult to bring a federal civil rights charge than a criminal charge, and here's why. They have to prove in federal court that the officer, Pantaleo, was specifically intending to violate Eric Garner's civil rights. Okay, that's a very high burden. That's why it's often difficult to bring these charges in federal court.
What is it that we have to see? I mean, what has to happen or not happen for the officer to be cleared of these charges or to be, to go to trial?
Well, I'm a former prosecutor, I'm a trial attorney, and in court we always say that the history tells the tale of intent. If you're going to figure out what someone's intent was at a particular moment, look at the history. How have they acted in the past?
Excellent.
Were you aware that this officer has been charged 3 times with civil rights complaints?
Well, hopefully all of that will come out in the near future in the federal case. And thank you so much,
I believe it will.
Prosecutor Peter Odom. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.